Alright, I just got back from seeing Inu-Oh in theaters, and that was a heck of a good time. I really enjoyed that movie. Though, I must admit, this is my second attempt at trying to see this movie because I went to go see it last night, the night of its general premiere, and the theater had a blackout. And it just kept having intermittent blackouts, and eventually just the movie just would not get going, so it was just like, okay, I'm just gonna come and see it the next day. And so here I am, and man, what an experience this was. This is the new theatrical release by critically acclaimed director Masaaki Yuasa. You might know him from Devilman Crybaby, Ping Pong, Tatami Galaxy. I think he was Tatami Galaxy, I'm pretty sure that's who it was. Just whole spread, a very artsy, very abstract, breaking out of the box kind of anime, and this is very much in that same vein. So the general story of this is we have two main characters. We have Tomona, I think was his name. Tomona, later known as Tomoichi, later known as Tomoari. He changes his name quite a few times, but anyway, this guy, born the son of just a common family who, through a supernatural occurrence, is blinded and eventually becomes a biwa player with a group of priests. And on the other end, we have Inu-Oh, who is this basically demon child who's like born this monstrous form from his mother and just grows up as this grotesque thing and falls in love with dancing. I don't know what the particular style of dancing is. They say it a lot in the movie, but I just don't remember what it was. That's going to be... I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on ancient Japanese history and ancient Japanese art forms for this review, because I'm not. But that is one of the core elements of this film. It's a very deep historical drama with some fantasy elements woven into it. So if that's your game, like if you like stuff like Heike Monogatari, you're gonna love this. In fact, in a way, this is almost like you could very loosely view this as a sequel to Heike Monogatari, because part of this film's plot revolves around retelling the tale of the Heike, and all of the different battles and stories that go along with it. So, in a weird way, it is kind of fortuitous that Science Saru did both of these productions, though Heike Monogatari was directed by Naoko Yamada, who I would say is very different in style from Masaaki Yuasa. But the similarities are definitely there. So if you want to do like a double feature of like binging Heike Monogatari, then just jumping right into this, I think that would be kind of an interesting experience. But for this movie in particular, I was just blown away at how immediate everything is. Like, there's basically two major segments to this film, and then like a little epilogue-ish segment. The first segment is basically just all set up. It's all like the lead up to Tomoichi/Tomari. I'm just gonna call him Tomoari because that's what he decides to call himself in this film eventually. Tomoari and Inu-Oh eventually meet and combine their different artistic talents in this film, Tomoari being the biwa player and Inu-Oh being the dancer, both of them being fucking phenomenal singers. I wanted to look up who the voice actors and singers were for this, but I forgot to do that before I started recording. But let it be known that they are absolutely incredible in their performances. But the first part of this film is basically just non-stop build-up and setup, and so many things happening in the lead-up to these two characters meeting, and it's just so incredibly well-paced, incredibly captivating. Like, there's really hardly any moments of downtime in the lead up to these two meeting. And then shortly after they meet, we get the other, probably bigger appeal of this movie is that this movie has been described in a sort of press release as a rock opera for the ages. And let me tell you, that is 100% what the second half of this movie is. It is just straight up rock performances in the form of ancient Japanese music. Though admittedly the actual instrumentation is very much like a rock band. Just this very heavy, just heavy strumming guitar that's just got this very plodding, very deliberate pace to it. And man, these musical segments in this second half are insane. Like, I'm pretty sure that one of them lasts like 15 to 20 minutes straight. Like, it's that insane. That is the level of rock opera that this film is on. It is just, I don't want to call it pure spectacle, because it does weave in a lot of the tale of the Heike into these performances, a lot of these quote-unquote forgotten tales, but I would definitely say that the main appeal of these segments is the spectacle, which, depending on how you view Yuasa, is either very on-brand or not very on-brand at all. Personally, I think it's a little mix of both. But these are just these absolutely bombastic and spectacular performance pieces, this performance art, as it were. Like, they really do some cool things with the technology for the time and how that technology might be used to create some facsimile of a modern rock concert with like laser light shows and projection mapping and different stage effects and just different like objects coming out of the stage and just different stuff like that. As the film goes on, they start to dress more and more like the ancient Japanese equivalent of what like a modern rock star would look like. Like, they're showing more and more skin. Their hair's getting longer. At one point, like, one of the priests describes Tomoari as dressing like a prostitute, which is kind of like reminiscent of how like kind of like glam metal bands that we had in like the 80s and 90s, where they would very much dress like women. So it's kind of got that cool like bucking off gender norms kind of stuff to it too, that music is so good at doing, and just musical performances are so good at doing. And it's just this incredible mixture of different ideas and just spectacle all woven into these really captivating performances that, like, there's just so many different things from like classic rock bands that I could see, like and just classic. I feel old now for describing it as classic, but there's a little, like, there was the way that Inu-Oh danced in one particular scene reminded me a lot of like Michael Jackson in a certain ways. It's weird to be describing that as classic at this point, but I mean, it was the 80s. So you see a little bit of that. There's a little bit of like Elvis. Again, you got like the glam metal, the heavy metal kind of bands woven in there. There was one segment that felt very much like Queen or David Bowie, a little bit of Pink Floyd thrown in there. This is just a mishmash of just rock and roll in ancient Japan, and it's a very cool combo. For the most part, they mesh the two styles pretty well, though during the actual rock segments, I would say the rock instrumentation very much takes over as opposed to the biwa instrumentation, the more classical stuff. But they do still use the biwa and other classical Japanese instruments in very strong, very powerful ways. They really draw out the best of all the instrumentation involved and all of the visual spectacle involved. I mean, it's Masaaki Yuasa. He is an extremely visual director. There is so much color, so much vibrance, so much movement, so much interesting framing, so much interesting compositing and layering to all the different frames in this film that it's just a marvel to watch, especially in like as we near like the end of the film, during like the final performance, the final big performance. It's just, I'm on the edge of, literally on the edge of my seat in the theater, because it's all coming to a head, not just with the masterful performance of it all, but also with the underlying plot going in the background, because there is still plot going on underneath all of these performances, because we have this little bit of the shogunate not exactly liking that this new guy is coming out with these new tales of the Heike, the tales of this clan that is sort of supposed to stay hidden for the most part in Japanese history. I mean, the Heike are the losers in this scenario. So we have Inu-Oh and Tomari coming out with these new tales to add to the legacy of the Heike, and the shogunate's not particularly happy about it, so it kind of weaves into that, like, oh, this is the new musical style and the old generation doesn't like it. And it does that in a very believable and interesting way. It doesn't feel like they crowbarred that message in. It feels very natural and organic. And it leads to an ending that I have some thoughts about. I'm not going to spoil anything about the ending, but it's a little more bittersweet than I was hoping for. It logically makes sense with how the story was going. I'm not saying it's not like that or anything. It's just I was hoping for a slightly different outcome. But again, there is some of that bittersweetness to this ending that very much makes sense in the context of the story. And I think my one issue with it is just they just a tad more like lead up to that particular ending, because after the bombast of this final performance, it does feel like it comes a little bit out of nowhere. But aside from that, just a generally all around really fascinating film with some well, there's not a whole lot of characterization involved in this film. Like, it's pretty bare bones, but it does give you what it needs. It gives you what it needs to understand Tomari and where he's coming from with his scenario, even more so with Inu-Oh and how he is developing through this, how this curse has affected him and how he is coming to terms with that throughout the film. So just a generally incredible performance, and of course with this being a heavily sound-oriented production, the sound design in particular is just really solid and on point. It reminds me of, like, it's kind of like the exact opposite of what Naoko Yamada did with Liz and the Bluebird, where that's very, like, subtle, very quiet, but still very noticeable sound design choices that are very crucial to, like, the tone of the film. This was the exact opposite. These very big, heavy, bombastic sound design choices that are very in your face and very palpable throughout the film, but it never feels out of place. It never feels like it's trying too hard. It just has this incredible rhythm to it that I just absolutely adored. So yeah, really enjoyed this film. Would absolutely love to watch it again just for the spectacle of it all. And also, this and Heike Monogatari I want to come back to after I actually learn a bit more about ancient Japanese history. Obviously, both of these are very much fictional retellings of these. In fact, I think Inu-Oh in particular is just a fictional story at large. Like, it obviously has some roots in Japanese history, but at least from the implication of what's said in the film, this is a mostly fictional scenario. So I don't think I'm going to learn too much about Japanese history that would inform me of this, but there are a lot of things, like about the sacred regalia, about the shogunate, about the Heike, that I think would very much inform me a lot more for a rewatch of this film. So yes, would highly recommend seeing this film. I think it's actually in theaters all weekend if I remember correctly. So definitely go out and see this if you were skeptical about seeing it. I'm gonna give this one, man, I think this is like a strong 8 to a light 9, somewhere in that range. I don't think it's not my favorite Yuasa project so far. I think I would still put Ping Pong and Tatami Galaxy above this, but it is definitely my favorite Yuasa project since Ping Pong, which, now that I think about it, has been, what, like 8 years now? Was that 2014, I think? So it's been like 8 years since Ping Pong. Man, time really do fly, huh? But yeah, definitely go out and see this film. Would highly recommend it. That's really all I have to say for now. Join me again in a few days when I go see the Takagi-san movie in theaters. But until then, my name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.